Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to your last lecture of first semester. This is on not only do we have big business, but we have big cities, and we get this Gilded Age urbanization. Much like we learned about in modern world history with the Industrial Revolution, one of the big things was the move into cities for these factories, for our robber barons, for all these industries that are growing, and what that does for the countries involved. And it's the same thing for the United States. And so as we begin this is chapter 18. Okay, this is what we're kind of going over, so you don't have to read chapter 18, but you understand. Urbanization happened for two reasons. It was a giant migration from agricultural regions of the east, where some moved west, but many moved to these cities looking for work. We also have a huge increase, and not as big as the Great Migration we'll see a little later, of African Americans leaving the South looking for opportunities. They would go into cities, but they really didn't get these factory jobs, okay? And most of them were service jobs, and most of these service jobs were accustomed to be given to women. So you'll see actually African American women outnumbering African American men in the workforce in these northern cities. But the biggest was immigration. Okay, it was huge during this time period. In many cities, immigration and the immigrant population was in the high 80% of the cities. And so after 1880, it's going to be considered new immigration. We get Southern and Eastern Europeans. Before that, old immigration, which was our Germans and Irish. Okay, Germans and Jews came to the United States with some money, with an education, and were able to advance economically a lot quicker. However, Southern and Eastern Europeans came with little education, with little money, and thus went to the cities. And they banded together into these ethnic groups. And this is where you get in cities all these different areas based on ethnicity. Okay, and this is much like old immigration with the Irish, but the new immigration, it is prevalent. And they will take jobs. They're reliable, but you don't have to pay them very much. And so the inequality gap grows because of this large immigrant population. And as you can see during the Gilded Age from this graph, it was rather high and it grew quickly. Okay, and it was because of this opportunity, and it's also this idea of the American dream that was sold in Europe. There was many immigrants that would go back because it wasn't true. There was a lot of negatives to immigration, and so thus you got groups coming together. Now we'll talk about this more on Monday. Now, what to do with all these immigrants? We want to assimilate them into our culture. You get things as the restrictive immigration league. Okay, this reaction to immigration was seen in the American Protective Association, and then five Harvard alumni came up with the Immigration Restrictive League. They were proposing literacy tests, ironically, for immigrants coming in, but there wasn't a whole lot of movement on this politically just because the immigrants were a reliable and cheap workforce. And so we will get the Chinese Exclusion Act because Chinese, Japanese were the huge immigration on the West Coast. But it's going to take a while for this. And mostly it's this idea of assimilation, although this was fought by those ethnic groups and those immigrants. With the growth of cities, we get this idea of city planning. Okay, city planning, you'll get parks started being created. You get such things as central parks. You get public buildings, museums, bridge, everything kind of at this time. Libraries start being planned into these cities because of the amount of people here. Also goes with this idea of new leisure activities for people. However, there's great problems with all these people. You get housing problems. So you get the idea of suburbs. They're going to be connected by our new ideas of mass transportation, trains, cable cars, trolleys. Think San Francisco. Okay, Chicago is a great example of this. They have an awesome train system, but it looks really old. Okay. And also you get what we call tenements. Tenements are going to be what we would call now the projects. You're going to load immigrants up. You're going to build them. They're very unsafe. A gentleman named Jacob Reese is going to create photographs of this, and you can type them, Google them real fast, how the other half lived. And they're going to be run down, numerous families in one building. But this was kind of the solution to the problem at the time. You're also going to start getting the vertical building of cities with the advent of skyscrapers. And so cities are now going to start going up to save room. Okay, and so this is when our modern day city becomes our modern day city. Now, there were numerous problems with this, and this is because of how many people move to cities quickly. You get these giant fires. The Chicago Fire of 1871 destroyed about 3.3 square miles of the city, 300 dead, 100,000 homeless. Chicago had a fire. Boston had a fire. This is when you start getting your fire departments being built. There was a lack of sanitation facilities. You still had domesticated animals going through, horses, cows, pigs. Plumbing wasn't ideal at this time, and so you had poor water quality, poor air quality, and so we'll slowly start getting that fixed, and we'll get the public health service in 1912. But also you get the idea of our new police forces because of how much the poverty kind of rose the crime rates in these cities as well. So all these problems come together as we move to the cities. Now, one of the things that does come up political machine-wise, it is these political machines and what they called these bosses who kind of ran them. And it was all about this voting power, okay, and to get these immigrants to vote your way. And so now you have the power and you could get politicians behind you. They would support you in what you needed because you could get them the votes because you have this large group of immigrants. And what these immigrants were looking for was support, foods, jobs, and in exchange, they would give you their loyalty, would give you their vote. Some of these were very corrupt, would use it for kind of almost inside trading contracts for businesses that were within the political machines. The best example of this would be Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall in New York. Okay, and they'd kind of run the streets. And so this is slowly, Teddy Roosevelt's going to be really good at kind of breaking these down when he was in New York. Also at this time, you see I keep moving my face, but at this time we get the rise of the middle class, which gives us the white collar workers. Income will rise for many, okay, including this. It was kind of the white collar jobs, and most people are going to become wage earners, meaning they are working for a wage. They're not producing what they need, and so they'll have some extra cash usually, and there'll become this emergence of consumer goods. This is when we get our department stores. This is when we get our catalogs. You can purchase things out, and they'll send them to you because we have better transportation for that. You also get spectator sports, baseball, basketball, football, some sports for women, tennis, golf, things like that. Theater will become big, but you have these vaudevilles, and I mispronounced that, but they numerous different acts, singing, plays, all that put together, which were really not famous, but there was a lot of support for them. We start getting our silent films during this time, and theme parks come about. Coney Island would be a great example of this. With this urbanization and with this industrial revolution, there becomes a increase in the need for education, and it was based on industry. And so you'll have 31 states that will have, and territories that will have some sort of requirement for schools. However, this is very unequal based on region. Rural areas, very hard to get education, and also based on race. African Americans suffered this the most. Native Americans not receiving education that was given to white boys and girls. As education for women increased at the primary level, secondary level, high school, most girls would go to high school, but when they got to college, there was fewer and fewer opportunities. But at this time, this is when you'll start getting female colleges created just for females, and it gave them a sense of purpose outside the family structure, which they had been relegated to for so long. So now women can go out, get an education with like minded women, and it's a powerful thing as this movement continues to grow. Also, universities and colleges will increase. The Morrill land grant during the Civil War will allow for this to happen. You also have these wealthy robber barons or captains of industry, however you looked at it, with more money, and medical science will increase. The germ theory will become accepted. We'll also say, hey, there's all these symptoms. Can there be cures for this? And that will increase rapidly. Okay, that's all I got for you this. See you Monday, Tuesday before Christmas break. Adios.